On September 15, 2010, a 55-year-old lawyer and gas professional named Greg Fleniken checked into the MCM Eleganté Hotel in Beaumont, Texas. It was a routine business trip. He called his wife Susie to say goodnight, just like he always did, and then settled into his room, number 348, for the evening. It was a night that began with ordinary, comforting routine, but would end in an inexplicable tragedy. By the next morning, Greg Fleniken would be gone, and the mystery surrounding his final moments would baffle investigators for months. When Greg failed to show up for his morning meeting, his coworkers grew concerned. They asked the hotel staff to perform a wellness check. When the door to room 348 was opened, they found Greg. He was lying in his bed, seemingly peaceful. The room itself was immaculate. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, no overturned furniture. Everything was exactly where it should be. At first glance, it looked like a tragic but straightforward case of natural causes. A man of his age, traveling for work, it was a sad but plausible scenario. The case was transferred to the medical examiner, and that's when the first real questions began to surface. The autopsy revealed something completely unexpected and deeply unsettling. Greg had sustained massive internal injuries, the kind of trauma you'd expect to see from a major car crash or a fall from a significant height. Yet, incredibly, there were almost no external marks on his body. How could someone suffer such devastating internal damage while showing no outward signs of a violent struggle or accident? He was found lying in his hotel bed. There was no evidence he had fallen. There was no sign of an assault. The medical findings were a flat-out contradiction. The case was no longer a simple tragedy. It had become a baffling medical mystery that seemed to have no logical explanation. The official investigation began to stall, unable to reconcile the peaceful scene in the hotel room with the violent trauma found within Greg's body. But there was one person who refused to let the questions go unanswered: his wife, Susie Fleniken. She knew her husband. She knew his health, his habits, his life. And she knew with a certainty that only a loved one can have that the story she was being told didn't make any sense. Susie wouldn't accept that Greg's death would be filed away as an unsolved puzzle. She was convinced that someone, somewhere, had the answers. When the official investigation hit a dead end, she made a decision that would change everything. She took matters into her own hands and hired a private investigator named Ken Brennan. Brennan wasn't just any PI. He was a former DEA agent with a long and distinguished career, known for his relentless pursuit of the truth and his ability to entangle the most complex of cases. He was exactly the fresh set of eyes this mystery needed. Ken Brennan arrived in Beaumont and immediately began his work. He wasn't looking for the easy answer. He was looking for the right one. With the methodical precision that defined his career, he reviewed every piece of evidence, every report, every photograph. He walked the hallways of the MCM Eleganté Hotel, trying to get a feel for the environment, trying to see what everyone else might have missed. He re-examined the scene in room 348, looking at the layout, the walls, the furniture. And then he did something incredibly simple yet utterly brilliant. He started investigating the room next door, room 349. Brennan's instinct led him to uncover the missing piece of the puzzle. He learned that on the night of Greg's death, room 349 had been occupied by a group of workers. During their stay, one of the men, in a moment of astounding recklessness, had discharged a firearm inside the hotel room. He fired the gun into the wall that separated their room from the one next door. It was a foolish, dangerous act, but the men likely thought of it as just that, a stupid mistake, a close call with no real consequences. They probably had no idea that their one thoughtless action had set in motion a devastating chain of events. The wall between room 349 and room 348 was just standard hotel construction, drywall and insulation, never designed to stop a projectile. The bullet fired from the gun traveled through that thin wall. On the other side, Greg Fleniken was resting in his bed. The bullet struck him. The unusual angle of entry and the nature of the projectile perfectly explained the bizarre medical findings that had stumped the examiners. It explained how Greg could have suffered such catastrophic internal injuries with almost no external sign of what had happened. He was struck without warning, in a moment of quiet repose. He likely never even knew what hit him and would have passed away very quickly. The impossible case finally had a logical, albeit tragic, explanation. Armed with Ken Brennan's groundbreaking investigation, the police were able to piece together the full story. They confronted the individual who had fired the gun. When presented with the evidence, he was reportedly in shock. He had never imagined, not for a second, that his careless act could have had such a terrible and final consequence. He was arrested, and the case was officially solved. This wasn't a resolution that came from a lucky break or a sudden confession. It was solved through sheer persistence. It was solved through the expertise of a seasoned investigator who knew to look where no one else had. And most importantly, it was solved because a grieving wife refused to give up her search for the truth. The story of Greg Fleniken is a powerful and sobering reminder of how quickly a single moment of carelessness can escalate into an irreversible tragedy. A moment of shockingly poor judgment, a complete failure to consider the consequences, a weapon handled with blatant irresponsibility. These choices combined to create a horrific outcome that nobody intended, but that forever altered the lives of everyone involved. This case also shines a bright light on the critical importance of thorough, dedicated investigation. What initially appeared to be a completely insoluble mystery was ultimately unraveled by careful, methodical detective work and the simple refusal to accept an easy answer. At the end of the day, we must remember who was at the center of this story. Greg Fleniken wasn't just a case file or a headline. He was a respected professional, a loving husband, a man whose life was full of value and meaning. His sudden and violent death left a gaping hole in the lives of his family and friends. His story now serves as a profound cautionary tale about personal responsibility and the devastating ripple effect of our actions. Thanks to the incredible investigative skills of Ken Brennan and the unwavering determination of Susie Fleniken, the truth of what happened that September night was brought into the light, justice was served, and accountability followed. While nothing can ever undo the tragedy that occurred in room 348, finding the truth brought a necessary measure of closure to those who love Greg, ensuring his story was not left as just another unexplained mystery. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into cases like this one. We'll see you next time.